You've probably heard about GoldenEye 007, but did you know there's actually a sequel? Well, not really a sequel, but there's a spiritual successor? Yeah. Perfect Dark. It's not a James Bond film. It has nothing to do with James Bond either. Just Perfect Dark. Let's play it. It's hard to think that many kids who are in love with modern first-person shooters these days have never played, or heck, ever heard of one of the many classic first-person shooters. It's pathetic how many of these same kids criticize these games for being too old and quickly turn their back without even playing them at least once. The unpleasant truth is that many of the younger generation have unfortunately been taught since birth to only accept games which are supposedly labeled as new and cutting edge. In other words, if your modern day FPS doesn't have the name Call of Duty or DLC on the cover, chances are it'll turn into a forgettable disaster. While it was games like Doom and Quake that helped create the sci-fi FPS, it was Perfect Dark that expanded on that, incorporating a ton of new features that are still used by developers to this very day. You probably know as much as I do that Perfect Dark is pretty much a carbon copy of GoldenEye, but set in the future, and with aliens. And James Bond has now been replaced by a woman? You know what this game reminds me of? Here's a hint.
Game over, man! It's game over!
Yeah, let's move on. In the dark, eerie world of 2023, a corrupt corporation named Apple, Datadyne, are hell-bent on ruling the world side by side with a group of beings known as the Skadar. Or maybe it's Skater. The president has been kidnapped, and the only person bad enough to end this takeover is a woman by the name of Joanna Dark, aka Perfect Dark. Only she can bring them to their knees and bring order back to the off-world colonies and the entire world. Or for the sake of me explaining the whole story, all you really need to know about Perfect Dark is that if guys are shooting you, you lock, load, and shoot the ever-loving crap out of them with deadly accuracy and power. Come to think of it, I really wasn't all that interested in the story at all in the first place. And besides, how can you focus on the story when all of the in-game action keeps your mind busy practically every single second? You can't, and I didn't fight it. I honestly thought that Perfect Dark was a game that I could easily beat in 1, possibly 2 weeks tops on the highest difficulty, because of how big of a GoldenEye fan I am. Thinking that I knew everything about how the game would function and how the enemies would react, needless to say, I was completely taken off guard by Perfect Dark's tweaked gameplay that it took me at least an entire month to even attempt the highest difficulty. The main reason why I found this game so hard for me was because of how advanced the AI has become, a feature that the game proudly boasts. For fans of Perfect Dark who have played both games, most have complained in GoldenEye that the enemies were intentionally unintelligent. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the enemies in GoldenEye and still think they offer up a fairly challenging experience. But I will admit, they did lack some realism from time to time. Perfect Dark, however, has not only fixed this programming design, but has also added to the enemy's overall aggressiveness. This is where it got really aggravating for me because basically any little minor detail that has encouraged the use of stealth in GoldenEye is gone in Perfect Dark, and has turned into more of a mindless shoot everything up and pray you won't die style of an FPS. Which would be okay if it was a Doom related game, but not with a game that many gamers call a spiritual successor to GoldenEye. The aiming feature in Perfect Dark is sloppy. Never have I ever seen an aiming system in any FPS where it deliberately wants you to miss your target. Don't believe me? I can't count how many times I've tried to headshot an unsuspecting guard from behind. A clear, close shot, mind you, and somehow miss him. I just can't stand its inconsistent nature, mostly because it has screwed me in situations that require both accuracy and consistency. Level design was a mixed bag for me, really. Some levels like Air Force One, the Villa, and the Datadyne Corporation building actually felt rather interesting with a high sense of variety and complexity. Unfortunately, those levels are all showcased at the beginning to middle of the game. Maybe it had something to do with the game's engine, visuals, or probably the fact that in most of these levels, every room or hallway is filled with enemies. Whatever the reason is, I just don't care for most of these levels, and I highly doubt I will ever feel any different about them. Still, if there was any reason at all to pick up this game, it would be for the multiplayer mode. At least I can get this out of the way and just agree with everyone that the multiplayer mode in Perfect Dark is perfect. Basically, everything you loved about the multiplayer in GoldenEye is present in Perfect Dark, and in a few ways repaired and added on. A large number of fun characters to use, new modes, more weapon settings, and bigger levels await you in this monster of a multiplayer mode. Artistically speaking, Perfect Dark looks amazing. Gone are the days of dark, solid colors and fog that you would expect to find in GoldenEye or any other N64 game up to that point. Thanks in part of the memory expansion pack that came with the game, Perfect Dark introduced hundreds of brand new textures and a color palette that was pleasing to the eye, all while still retaining its serious FPS gaming attitude. Well, sort of. Don't get me wrong, I love the art in Perfect Dark, but for some reason I just couldn't seem to get into them like I did with other FPS games. I think the reason was that the dark, gritty graphics of GoldenEye acted as a metaphor for the game's heart-pounding excitement. Perfect Dark, while visually pretty and detailed as it was just too polished for me.